Hey, friends. So after Arwen's tag, the Tarot 15 tag, I had commented on one of Christine and Celeste's videos about how cool it would be to do or to see people's sort of first decks, because her video was all about, or one of her questions was all about her first deck, um, which I just loved seeing. So she actually took that and created a tag, Tarot First Last Always, which, since I was sort of tangentially related to it, I thought would be fun to do. I hate showing myself, but I wanted to do this quickly and I have some time, so I'm going the easy road and just using my photo booth app. So anyway, I'll jump right in. So what we're doing here is the very first deck we had, and then the most recent or the last deck we bought, and then one that's sort of, always the one we're always going to go back to. And I, in my inimitable way, am cheating already by choosing to, because I couldn't make up my mind, and I have reasons. Anyway, so my first deck, I've talked about this before, but it's the original Rider-Waite tarot pack, and people get some gloss there. See, I'm not used to doing it this way. People really don't like this particular coloration of this deck, but it was my first. It was my first love. I talked about this in the Arwen video. I'm going to look for some of the cards that I really love. I love the Queen of Pentacles here. King of Pentacles is also one of my favorites. I remember opening the box, and I remember encountering the, I love the clouds. I just love, people really hate the thick line art, on this deck, but I actually really like it in the way that, we sort of love the things that we encountered first. It's the majors in particular that I remember walking through, but I just remember the really visceral reaction that I had to many of the cards. You know, it's whether you love it or hate it, you can't deny the power of the art that Pamela Coleman Smith created. Um, she was a genius, and I think sort of a really unpretentious genius, and that's what I love about this art. So the Tower is one that I remember looking at and just sort of finding, a really visceral reaction to. The Death card here. Always my favorite hermit. There are many hermits that I love, but this is a hermit that will always be on my top list. I even love the Hierophant. People really don't like the Hierophant card in part because of this particular deck. But I really like it. I don't know why I'm even bothering showing, because can't imagine anyone who hasn't seen it. But it's just it's my first, and I love it, and again, probably my favorite Fool. So yeah, I mean, I've talked about little bits before, but I grew up in a very Catholic household, and I remember having to hide all this stuff. I started reading when I was about 19, and it may have been a bit of a rebellious act, but I did it nonetheless. And I guess the thing that happened was that, I don't want to speak for anyone or against anything, but I guess I started at a certain point in my late teens, discovered how passive my understanding of the religion of my youth can make us. You know what I mean? I realized that if I were going to do any of the things I wanted to do in life, I needed to be more active, and this art form really helped me do that, and I think that's one reason why I grew to love it. And I think that's one reason why when I started reading about it, I recognized it as something more than what I thought it was. And I know there's a really kind of cool movement in the world among readers now to kind of reclaim the idea of being a fortune teller. and I get that, but I think if I had approached it from that aspect, I never would have come to it. It though I'm moving a little bit away from the more psychopoetic um, techniques of my learning. I never would have gotten anywhere near it if I had thought it was fortune telling. So I obviously needed a different approach. So, but that's how I got into it, and that's my first deck. So, the last one just arrived this weekend, and I've been loving it so much. This was a love at first sight, and this will actually probably become an always deck too. I can tell already. There are so many walkthroughs of this deck lately. It just sort of exploded, because it's just, it. I'm surprised it hasn't exploded, but the timing was right. This is the Taroko, not the Taroko. This is La Corte de Taroki. It's absolutely stunning and really fits. I've just been shuffling it, um, on conference calls just all afternoon, listening and having something to do kinesthetically. I talked about this before too. While I'm listening, I find really helpful. Really, really helps me focus. So it's just it's really. I mean, shuffling cards in general is what's really addictive, but this deck in particular, because it's such a weird shape, is special. Sorry. So anyway, loving it so much. Again, you can see Patrick from In the 78 Cards does a walkthrough of it. L from Sacred Seed, I think, does a walkthrough of it. This really was love at first sight for me. Come on, so good. Um, I don't know. I'm so thankful that I allowed myself to broaden my reading style, because the decks that I've sort of gotten in my life in the last few weeks, in particular, in the last few months, but the last few weeks in particular, have been really, really special, and it's really been a freeing thing to read with these pip styles. Look how big this deck. I mean, it's like, come on, it's huge, but I love it so much. The Sun card. The lighting in here is really bad, but anyway, that's this, and I love it. So this is going to join the ranks of the next two that I'm about to show you, and I'm going to show them to you as soon as I can get myself to stop shuffling. All right, it's time to stop when you're making a big mess. All right, so I should pick one, and I couldn't. So let me just talk about why I'm cheating. These are bridge decks. They're not decks of bridge cards. They are decks that bridged a gap for me. And because of that, they will always be go-to decks for me. So the first one is the World Spirit Tarot. I have talked about this many times. This is the original version, the Llewellyn version, but it is available again through the artist. It's a really rich colored deck. It's also multicultural, and where in some instances I think it can get a little cloying, and maybe a little stereotypical. Especially at the time, it was the only deck that I could think of or had seen that was even remotely multicultural. So it's really just a work of art. It's linoleum block print. It's so beautifully colored. The backs are not reversible, but I've always said, I've said many times, I don't actually read reversals anymore anyway. I let the kind of context of the reading and the question guide me. But if I did, I wouldn't mind. And I've talked about how before this deck this particular deck taught me how to read the core cards. Really, before that I didn't know what I was doing. So That's the first two. So I really love it, and I think it's a special one. I actually have two copies of this first edition, because I was worried even then it was gonna. And I should say I actually ordered a second copy of the the Court de Taroki too, because that one, it's a limited edition. Who knows? What if something happens? I've got to keep a copy at the office just in case. Um, so I have one in the box, but I also keep it in this really beautiful green silk bag that I bought way back when. It's got a rip in it now, right there, which is sad. But yeah. So this is that. So this was like the first deck that I really fell in love with, and then the second one, I won't belabor. Again, this really was a bridge deck for me, and in that way, it was important. It is also the deck I use the most for reading for others. It is or has been up until recently, because I really last month from March really only used pip decks, but it's the Wild Unknown. Again, this is a special deck. These decks that I'm choosing are really decks that were, I didn't know what to expect when I got them, but I got them, and they in their way each had a transformative effect on my reading experience. So that's why I picked them. And the World Spirit and this are closely related because I don't mind reading for others with them, because I don't feel like they're going to be exclusionary. When I talk about multicultural decks or multi-ethnic or multi-gender decks, the reason that it matters to me is I mean, I've talked about this before. As a gay person, I don't always want to look at a straight lover's card, even though I don't think the lover's card actually is about love or romance. I think it's about choices, and I think it's about distractions. Um, you still just get tired of being in a world where like only straight people are depicted, and I know it's the same for people of different ethnicities and different skin tones. You just sort of don't want to see all white people all the time, which I get. So when I read for others, I try, because I generally don't know, what their ethnicity is or whatnot. I try to be conscious of that, and where I can, to choose decks that are a bit more culturally diverse, a bit more sensitive, and if I can't do that, make sure they're A, really old, from a specific region, or B, they don't have any people in them at all. And this one doesn't have any people in them. Everyone has seen this deck. Everyone has strong feelings one way or another. But the reason this was important to me, beyond the fact that there's no people in it, is the fact that the minors are so different from Rider-Waite-Smith. And this was the first deck where I cared enough, I was drawn in enough by the artwork to not be bothered by that. And it gave me a chance to start the transition away from Rider-Waite-Smith, which I, again, love, but have been feeling a bit hemmed in by. I have talked about this. I sometimes feel the pictures distracting. So I had to include this as an always deck because it is the first one I reach for. It's the one I carry around with me all the time in my bag, in my backpack. Whenever I go anywhere, it's with me. And it just, again, it was a formative deck late of my reading career. The first two that I showed you, I got really early on. I can't remember when I think the World Spirit came out in 2001, because I remember having it with me honestly on September 11th. I remember sitting in a hotel lobby with a bunch of coworkers and doing readings, just to distract ourselves from how terrible the world was. So it had to have been around that time, because I think it was fairly new at that point. This I actually got within the last year or two, and then the Court de Taroki I got Saturday morning. So anyway, that's my tarot first, last, and always. And I do think that my last deck, my most recent, will become an always deck. So again, if you're watching this, consider yourself tagged. I can go ahead and say, because I was tangentially related to the initial. And I'm going to leave the link to Christine and Celeste's channel down below. So yeah, be good, be well, take care of yourselves, and I'm gonna have another video. I'm working on a little project, which may or may not be interesting, so I'm gonna share that, the making of it, shortly. So if you do make one of these, comment so I can watch it. All right.